On today's show, the Hawks' winning streak is now 4 after a nice home win over the Charlotte Hornets on this Wednesday evening. We'll break it all down and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1929 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you deep into the night here on a Wednesday evening into Thursday in mid-March. And today's podcast is brought to you by the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook. And right now, if you're a new customer at FanDuel, get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins at FanDuel. The place to go is FanDuel.com to get started. I also want to encourage you at the top of the show, as I always do, to make it your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks. Check us out and subscribe to the podcast anywhere you want to find your podcast. That includes Apple and Spotify and Overcast on the audio side. And we are also on YouTube. So please like this video as you are watching it and tell your friends about the podcast. We'll be diving in today to what became a 123-110 win at home for the Hawks. This is now 4 in a row for Atlanta. And yes, a couple of those games, at least the last 2, have been against pretty favorable competition, but that happens sometimes in the NBA. And nothing is assured ever, and the Hawks basically held serve / taking care of business, however you want to frame that, a win that they definitely should have gotten in this game, but they had to go get it, and they went out and got it. So that's kind of the very broad takeaway from this one. But obviously the return of Trey Young from a 1-game absence, as well as Karis LeVert. The Hawks did operate without Clint Capella in this game for family reasons, but largely the full strength rotation, at least in the non-Jalen reality that the Hawks have been living in for a while now. And it was kind of a pretty gross game overall, especially in the first half, kind of a rock fight at times in this game. But the Hawks took control in the third quarter. We're up by as many 15 points in the second half. It never got terribly close down the stretch. They were up by 9-ish with a couple minutes to go. Ended up being 13 at the very end of the game, and plenty of stuff to get to. But Trey Young setting a new career high and approaching history with free throw shooting in this game, which we'll talk about more later on in this game. But a nice two-way performance from the Hawks at times in this game. And I want to lead actually with the defense, even on a night when Trey was the big headliner with the way he played, particularly in the second half. But defensively, it was a pretty fast-paced game by the end in terms of number of possessions, lots of possessions in this game. But the Hawks had a 104 defensive rating. That's a very, very good number against anyone. Now, it started off pretty rough in the first quarter, which Quinn Snyder did actually say post-game. I asked Quinn after the game about the defense, and he kind of led with that, kind of a rough first quarter, rough first few minutes of the first quarter in particular. But after that, they buckled down pretty well. The Hornets actually shot the ball well from three-point range, 40% from 3, and the Hawks still managed to have a very good defensive performance, which is really a good sign, I would say, overall, as far as the health of the defense was concerned. And watching this game back, a lot of those looks that the Hornets made were just, pretty covered looks. There were some other ones too, as there always are, but I thought the defense was actually good process-wise for Atlanta in this game, and they also created 21 turnovers. That included 13 steals. They also had 6 blocks, lots of havoc creation all the way across. And usually Dyson is going to be able to do that. He had 4 steals in this game, but 2 for Don Barlow, for instance, 1 for Niang, 1 for LeVert, 1 for V. Krejci, 2 for Mohamed Gay. Lots and lots of deflections and general havoc being created defensively was impressive. And they still did that while not fouling a lot. Only 18 free throw attempts allowed, and they held the Hornets to sub 50% on 2. So basically the only thing Charlotte did well offensively in this game was make threes. And if you can do that, if there's one area you can kind of maybe get beat in a little bit and everything else is pretty good, yeah, look, you're grading on a curve to some degree. Charlotte is a pretty bad offensive team, but at the same time, they are better with LaMelo Ball, who was not good in this game, which probably helped. And the Hawks were actually credited for that. I would say Dyson in particular should be credited for that. But they have real talent at times offensively. You got LaMelo, you got Mark Williams, you got Miles Bridges. They have real players on offense, and the Hawks did a pretty good job overall defensively in this game, even on a night when, again, they made some threes, and the Hawks were still able to hold up pretty well. And by the way, with the way the game was going, a rock fight, getting stops is very important in that kind of low-scoring environment for a lot of the game, and that was vital with having the Hawks be, not losing by 10 at times in this game. Also, offensively, it was very solid overall by the numbers, but I would say very, very good after halftime as far as efficiency is concerned. So they had 117 offensive rating in the game. That is not special, but it's very solid, is what I would say overall. 1.17 points per possession. That's a little bit better than the Hawks' average for the season. That's a good number, like a top 10 kind of number offensively. But in the second half, it was 134, which is very, very, very good. They scored 71 points on 53 possessions in the second half. That is excellent stuff in a slow-paced game. Not slow, but like an average-paced game in the second half. And the Hawks were pretty electric offensively after halftime. They ended up being pretty good as far as overall shooting efficiency, 59% true shooting in the game. But a big part of that was free throws. So they tied, the Hawks did, their second most free throw attempts of the season with 39 in this game. The only game they've actually taken more than this all year long was quite literally the season opener against Brooklyn back in October. It was a weird game that night. The Hawks took a lot of free throws in the game and also made them. Now, if you follow the podcast throughout the season, you would know this. The Hawks have not always been the best free throw shooting team, and they've been plagued by opponent free throw shooting all year long. Still right now, coming into the night, the Hawks were dead last in opponent free throw percentage, 80.7% against them this year. And the Hawks are in the bottom 10 at about 77% as far as makes. Now, the Hawks are actually a high free throw team. The Hawks are third in the league coming into the night in free throw attempts per game, but they shattered that number in this game and shot 35 of 39, about 90% at the line on huge attempts, and that's obviously a nice trump card to have in your back pocket to go out and win by a decent margin. Trey Young went 21 of 21 in this game. And I'll come back to that later on when I talk about him and the other players at the end of the podcast. But I have to say this first. Per Hawks PR, Trey is only the sixth player in NBA history to take at least 21 free throw attempts in a game and make them all. So not quite like an absolutely historic moment, but certainly when you're only the sixth person in NBA history to do something in a game, that's pretty notable. He was only a couple attempts away from tying or passing Dominique Wilkins for the team record in that area, but Trey was 21 of 21 at the line, and that's obviously not something that everybody else can do in the league. Also, only 14 turnovers in the game from the Hawks in 105 possessions. That's a very, very good ratio of ball security, and they kind of needed that because free throw line was really nice to them, obviously. They were not good around the rim. In fact, the Hawks were 6 of 15 in shots at the rim in this game. That is very low attempts and a terrible percentage. They missed a bunch of easy looks around the rim. Dyson missed some, Onyeka missed some, Trey missed some. All three of those guys were not good around the rim in this game. And the Hawks still were able to kind of overcome that because they shot pretty well from three, 39%, which is not incredible, but certainly very good. And then all the free throw attempts and all the makes as well. They played 10 guys in this game, did the Hawks. All of them, all 10, scored at least 6 points. So only Trey was a standout offensively in this game. He had 35 points. The next highest scorer on the team was 15 points. They had 9 guys between 6 and 15 points. So good balance overall. And by the way, the bench had 57 points in this game. This is a big stat from Hawks PR. The Hawks have now scored off their bench 50 points or more 20 times this year. That is already the franchise record. Already, with 16 games left in the season. So there's probably a safe bet that they're going to do it at least one more time or more than that. But to break a franchise record for a season in game 67, 66, whatever it was tonight, that's pretty impressive. Now, part of that is that they've kind of leaned into a little bit, earlier in the year, for instance, DeAndre Hunter was coming off the bench, scoring a lot of points. It's not all of that, obviously, but the Hawks are certainly willing to have some of their best scorers come off the bench. But still, it isn't just that. They've had a very good, potent bench throughout the year, especially basically anytime the Hawks have had a semi-reasonable injury situation, they've had a good bench all year long. Obviously, there's a point on no return when you're down like 4 or 5 guys at the same time. It gets a little bit dicey. But even on a night without 2 of their starters from most of the season, Joe Johnson, Clay Capella, they're still able to go out there and score 57 points and really soundly beat up on Charlotte's bench. Now, again, Charlotte's a bad team. I get that. But the Hawks played well off the bench. They were balanced in this game. And basically no one, I would say, played poorly. There was some bad shooting. But honestly, the 3 guys who shot the worst from the field in this game were the 3 standouts for this. Like, I would argue they're 3 best players right now that are active. Trey, Dyson, Onyeka. They were the 3 guys who missed a bunch of shots. Everybody, and also Trey was great at the line. Everybody else was pretty solid. And as far as the way they played in this game, it was pretty solid. So, all told, it wasn't A+ performance from the Hawks by any means. Like, you're grading on a curve to some degree. That's part of why I do this podcast the way that I do it, is to give you like the full picture. And yeah, just like Monday, in a game the Hawks won at home against a very bad team, they didn't play incredible in this game. If you combine all the factors together, the poor rim finishing, all of that, they played like a B- game in this game, and they won by 13 points because they were playing a team that they can play that way against and still beat. But I opened with this. I'll close the first segment with this. Nothing is assured in the NBA. So yeah, I'm sure if you want to dismiss this win as like you just beat the Hornets, I understand that, and it is worth keeping in mind the context. But if you simulated these two games against Philly and Charlotte 100 times, you wouldn't win. You wouldn't win them both every time, and that's important context. So 4 wins in a row for the Hawks. The schedule was easier moving forward, as I talked about extensively on yesterday's show. By the way, if you missed it, that show is still relevant right now. I did a full mailbag podcast talking about some big picture stuff on Tuesday evening into Wednesday. Listen to that one. Tell your friends. But yes, the schedule is more favorable now, but the Hawks earned that. Like everybody plays the same 82 games to some degree. There's small differences there, but the Hawks played a lot of difficult teams in a row, and now it's been a little bit more favorable. And crucially, they won those games. Not a given, and the Hawks get that win, and now we're in a pretty good spot when it comes to the playoff chase and where they were, especially when in comparison to where they were just a few weeks ago at this point. All right, more to come on the podcast, including my more granular thoughts on this game, observations, notes, etc. At the end of the show, what we do is dive into the player-by-player evaluations in this one. But first, a quick break to hear from our sponsors. This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now, Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. The expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert will find you every deduction possible, file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. All so you get the most money back, guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. That is TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. To get details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Today's show is sponsored by Monarch Money. Have you ever checked out your bank account and wonder where actually all of your money went? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, etc., it's always easy to lose track if you want to, and that's where Monarch Money comes in. Monarch Money is your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances, and Monarch Money is not just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center for your life. You can track all of your accounts, your investments, and spending all in one place, so you can actually stop managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized how much I was spending on food delivery, for example, and now I budget smarter and save more money in the process. Instead of juggling even more multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check on your finances, track your spending, and even plan long-term goals in the same place. And managing money with your partner is even smoother than ever as well. You can share personal accounts and set goals, stay on the same page without all of the stress that comes along with it. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA. That's code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com. for 50% off your first year. That is monarchmoney.com. That promo code is LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. One more time, it's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA. All right, we'll dive in now to kind of how this game unfolded in my notes along the way. The Hawks actually trailed this game early on, a 13-4 early run by the Hornets. The only thing that was good in that sequence actually was Dyson had an awesome block to stop a fast break and then hit a floater on the end of the floor. But they had back-to-back breakdowns defensively. They allowed 3 consecutive dunks. So early in the podcast, I mentioned this. Quinn even said it unprompted kind of post-game. They had a really rough stretch early on. A couple of bad low man possessions from Mogay, mistakes. He was not the only one, but certainly some ugliness defensively early on in the game. And obviously it improved from there, but they were down, not by a lot, but they were certainly kind of in a early hole. Then they made some shots coming out of that. Riche had a 3, LeVert had a 4-point play, etc. They had 3 guys in the G League tonight, so they only had 11 available players. The only guy who was available to play and did not play was Garrison Matthews. Not a huge surprise there, but it was the 9 guys who have been playing, except for it was Dom Barlow in place of Capella, who was out again for family reasons in this game. But Vit Krejci returned, obviously played earlier in this week as well, but he was the 10th man. So there was some uncertainty, I would say, about what would happen once Krejci was back and everybody else was back. Because obviously Krejci played Monday, but Trae and LeVert did not. But essentially they're going with 10. And they may not have it every game, but I think organizationally, they think Vit is kind of too good to not play, which I do understand. Now, I will say this, as we'll get into a lot more later, I thought Riche played not even close enough in this game. So that's a question moving forward. But it's one of those quote unquote good problems. You could kind of have real depth on the roster, and they played them all in this one. The Hawks did not play well in the first quarter. Now they had a couple good passing moments, I would say. One by Niang, one by Barlow, one by Trae. They were up by 1 point because they played good defense for the most part after those first 5 minutes of the game, basically. Defensively, it did improve. By the way, I think Trae missed 3 or 4 floaters in the first quarter plus. They were all good looks, honestly. But the Hawks did score first in the second quarter to kind of take the lead again. A couple nice threes from Beat, actually. A brilliant no-dip three on the right corner from Beat Krejci, who was pretty good in this game. But it was a slog as it was the entire game. In fact, it's probably peaking in the second quarter. It was 22-20 in the second quarter. It was a rock fight. The whole game in some respects, but certainly in that period. And the Hawks shot 32% from the field in the second quarter, and they won the quarter, which is speaks for itself. The Hawks were up by 3 at halftime, despite a 100 offensive rating, literally 100 exactly. But they were good defensively, and as this happened even more later on, the trio of Trae, Dyson, and Onyeka shot 7 of 24 from the field in the first half, and the Hawks were winning, which is probably because of the Hornets to some degree, but it was enough to do the other stuff well and play well from that point forward. Now, the big thing is the Hawks opened the half in the third quarter with an 11-0 run over about 2.5 minutes. That was the one time in the game where the Hawks put the pedal to the floor, basically. That was their one big run of the game. And from that point forward, you could argue they were in control. Now, the lead got down to 5 in the fourth quarter, so they were not in full control, but they never trailed again. They were the better team in this game overall, but that was the one time they kind of zoomed ahead. And, they made some shots, a couple of steals. The Hornets missed their first 5 shots from the floor. And the Hawks were also forcing turnovers a lot. They had 16 turnovers forced in 15 minutes. It was pretty impressive. Trae had a vintage quarter in the third. As we'll talk about later on, he was great in the second half, but he had 10 points in about 6 minutes to begin the second half. Then, crucially, Atlanta got in the bonus. And Trae is one of the best in the league, one of the best in the world at exploiting when teams are in the bonus because he is very, very crafty. And look, there's a debate that people can have if they want to about free throw drawing. I know it's happening with Shea right now as well. Trae is a pro at drawing fouls, but also, if you watch this game back, there wasn't a lot of Trae grifting. There are nights when Trae grifts, and I mean that in a loving way, honestly, but there are nights when he's clearly making the contact. The Hornets were very, very, very overzealous, I thought, fouling wise in this game. I would say the vast majority of Trae's free throw attempts were very obviously fouls by the Hornets. And, it's a lot of free throw attempts. I get that, but he was in total control. He had 17 points in the third quarter alone, and he did it without making a 3 in that period. So he was the best player on the floor by a lot. And the Hawks were up by 11 points at the end of the third quarter, and it really wasn't even that close except for the fact that the Hornets made 7 threes in the third alone. That was, honestly, it felt like the game was over. It wasn't over, but it felt that way because the Hawks were just so obviously outplaying them. But Charlotte hit 7 threes in a quarter. And when you do that, you're not going to get blown out too much. So going to the fourth, it was all right, the Hawks are in pretty decent shape here. And then, of course, they allow a 7-0 run right away. It's down to a 4-point game, and it's a game again. Now, I noticed this in real time. I did not like the fact that the Hawks played a long stretch in the second half without either Dyson Daniels or Zachary Richichet on the court. Now, they're different players. Dyson's a better player than Richichet at this point in time. But defensively, Richichet is a very good, useful, long, smart player. And that unit, without those guys both on the floor, was struggling defensively, I thought. And I'll note this now. Also, those minutes, by the way, came with at one point they were playing Trae, Veet, and Barlow together without either Dyson or Zach. And I hated that. So, Quinn, sometimes the discourse gets a little bit sour about Quinn sometimes. I will tell you when I don't like things. I didn't like this at all. And here's the big thing. Richichet did not play the final 17 and a half minutes of this game. I don't like that. Full stop. Now, I don't think it's fireable. I saw some crazy thing. I get all that. I didn't like it at all. I noted it in real time. In fact, I was the one in the media that I literally asked the Hawks in the fourth quarter if Richichet was hurt. Because I was like, let me just rule this out right now. Is he hurt or not? Because if he's not hurt, I don't like this. And I was told pretty quickly, no injury, and he just didn't play anymore. Now, Quinn says positive things about Richichet after the game. No problem there. But once it became the 5-minute mark, I was pretty sure that he wasn't going to come back in because they tend to close with LeVert, which I don't think is crazy. I think LeVert is obviously a veteran player, et cetera, et cetera. But I thought it was pretty bad to not play Zach more than he did in the second half. It didn't bite them, obviously. But on a night there was a win. That was the real critique that I had along the way. Anyway, It was never close again. It was like 10-ish mid-court. It was actually a great possession by Don Barlow defensively against LaMelo Ball that I thought was worth pointing out. There was a rough sequence for both teams mid-court. It was like turnover, like just wild, ugly basketball. But I thought the game was probably over after a couple of threes from LeVert and Niang to go by 13 with like 5 to go. That felt dagger-ish. It wasn't over, but that was like kind of the final time where it was like, all right, this is probably it. It was down to 9 again, and then LeVert hit another 3 with like 2 minutes to go, and that was probably the official dagger at that point in time. But it was never like a fully in doubt result over the last, 9 minutes of the game, something like that. Hawks were pretty much in control, barring a collapse, and that collapse did not come. So the Hawks covered the spread, all those things. So, look, other than the Ricochet minutes thing, I thought the Hawks did a pretty good job utilizing all 10 players in this game. It is a challenge, to be fair to the staff, to play 10 guys. I thought it was a little bit too much Veet, not enough Ricochet in the second half, probably a little bit too much of man at times too in this one. But look, the reality is, if you're going to play 10, I'm not saying you have to play 10, but if you're going to play 10, you probably have to have somebody not play very much. And that, honestly, probably 2 guys, because Mo Gay played 14 minutes in this game as the starting power forward. So it ends up that probably at least 1, but most likely 2 guys out of your 6 guys playing wing 4 minutes have to not play very much. And in this game, it was a mixture of Gay and Ricochet not playing very much. So there you go on that. All right, still a win's a win, and a pretty good second half performance. By the way, Trae had 26 after halftime, which was a pretty important thing for the Hawks, putting up their 134 offensive rating in the second half. All right, more to come in a second on the individual player stuff in this game after this. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. March Madness is here, and they're giving you the chance at FanDuel to get in on the action like never before. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, and right now, if you are a new customer, get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins at FanDuel. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and everything in between. Even weigh in on which team's going to cut down the nets at the end of the process. I have my eye on some underdogs this year, of course, and FanDuel's making it easy to back them with spreads and totals, player props, game props, future bets, live betting, same-game parlays, and so much more. Beyond college hoops, they also have the NBA, of course, NHL, baseball, football, golf, tennis, soccer, auto racing, MMA, boxing, etc., etc. And with tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something going on, and it's something exciting to bet on at FanDuel Sportsbook. The app at FanDuel is also easy to use, and when you win, you can pay instantly with no waiting around whatsoever. Again, if you are a new customer, get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins at FanDuel. The place to go is FanDuel.com to get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. All right, we'll dive in now to the player-by-player evaluations in this game. As I mentioned earlier, the bench was very strong with 57 points. All 5 guys off the bench had 9 points or more, and they were all pretty efficient as well. So some positive stuff off the bench for the Hawks in this game. Veet played 15 minutes, made all 3 of his threes. That helped him for sure. 11 points, had a steal. I think Veet doesn't look 100% to me physically. Maybe that's just me. But other than that, I think he played fine. Defensively, a little bit hit and miss, I thought. But the shooting was very helpful. The passing is always helpful. I think Veet, he spoke after the game. Also got banged up a little bit over the course of the game. Had a little bit of a wrist thing, it seemed like, post-game. But looked fine to me, which is good to see from Veet. Don Barlow, 18 minutes, 9 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals, and a block. Dom had a pretty good game, I thought. Now, he wasn't perfect. There were some mistakes along the way, but I thought he was up to the challenge. I think defensively he played pretty well, actually. I mentioned them before the play against LaMelo Ball, but some good positioning stuff. He's not going to be a dominant rim protector. He's more of that like versatile, fluid big man versus like an actual like full-time anchor defensively. But he does have some pretty good feel for the game. The passing was pretty good in this game. He missed 1 3 badly, but got to the line 6 times and 5 of them. I thought Dom looked pretty good in the backup center role. I am, of course, very high on him compared to most people. But I think Dom is a real player in the NBA, basically. Elsewhere, Terrence Mann, 21 minutes, 10 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists. I thought he was just okay. He's probably their worst bench guy for me, like compared to the normal baseline. I thought he was just like fine. 3 of 4 on 2s, 1 of 4 from 3, -1 in the game. Like he was just okay. Nothing spectacular, nothing bad, just average. George Niang, 12 points on, I believe it was 7 shooting possessions, so pretty efficient there. 4 rebounds, 3 assists, and a steal. Hit 2 threes, got to the line 4 times, made all 4. He's been getting a little bit into his Iowa State bag. For those of you who don't know this, he played at Iowa State, was much more of a like initiator scorer type than a 3-point shooter at that point in time. But his back to the basket game has been playing up recently. But I thought he played well in this game and defensively was able to hold up despite his limitations on that end of the floor. Karis LeVert was good in his first game back after missing the game on Monday. 15 points, 4 rebounds. He was 1 of 1 on twos, 4 of 8 from 3. He was their most prolific three-point shooter in this game. Looked good, played well, and LeVert continues to be, honestly, he's been very good destroying Atlanta. Not every game, but the overall numbers for Karis LeVert in Atlanta have been very, very strong, and that's been a big part of the Hawks staying afloat and more in the absence of Jalen Johnson, et cetera, et cetera. All right, to the starters in this game. Mo Gay, 14 minutes, 6 points, 2 steals, 2 blocks, 3 rebounds. I thought Mo was very good defensively. Like, outside of the first 3 minutes. He made some mistakes, but once he settled in, the playmaking speaks for, to have 4 stocks in 14 minutes is not a small thing. By the way, stocks is steals plus blocks, if you don't know that. But Mo is just a playmaker defensively. The highs been very high. Offensively, he had 1 nice 3. He got a little floater to go. I thought he looked pretty good after the first 3 minutes, basically. And I think that's probably what cost him the playing time in the first half. But he played more in the second half, and I think he earned those minutes after halftime. Now, the one guy who had a rough game by his standards in this game overall, I thought was Okongwu. So Okongwu had 7 points, did have 10 rebounds, but only 3 of them defensively. 1 assist, no steals, no blocks, 5 fouls. He was 2 of 9 on twos, 1 of 3 from 3, and no free throw attempts. So he wasn't awful, I didn't think, but the finishing around the rim, he kind of had he had a very rough offensive game. And of course, it was on a day where I was praising him on Twitter for his breakout, basically, which has been happening in the numbers. And by the way, people were saying this, and I got out in front of it early. It's not just because he's averaging more minutes. Like, obviously, his numbers are up, but so are his per-minute numbers, which means it's not just about playing time. He's been playing great. And of course, he did not play well in this game. But that's nothing to be alarmed by. I thought he just had one of those nights, finishing around the rim, had some close misses, etc., but nothing to panic about. And he was still plus 9 in his minutes in this game. Elsewhere, I already did the rant about Ricochet, but I'll add to it right now. So 21 minutes for Ricochet in this game. It's not like, that's not a crazy total, but it is the first time since February 10th that he's played that little. Here's the funny part. The Hawks actually had their best net rating of any player on the floor tonight when it was Ricochet. The Hawks were like plus 21 net rating with him on the floor. They were plus 10 in the game in 21 minutes. And they had a defensive rating of around 80 with Ricochet on the court and 120 with him off. Now, that's not all him by any means, but it was clear to me that like they were missing him defensively when he wasn't out there. So obviously Quinn is not one to give direct answers. There was no like, hey, this is why he didn't play more. But I didn't like that. I thought Ricochet looked good and played well. He didn't have a huge stat game, 8 points for 4 rebounds, a steal and a block, but he was active. He hit 2 threes. Like, he looked good to me overall, and I wish he played more, but there you go. Elsewhere, Dyson Daniels. Now, he had a rough offensive game, just like Okongwu did. He was 5 of 13 on twos, 0 of 1 from 3. So 10 points on 14 shots, not his best work. But did have 3 assists, and he had 4 steals and 2 blocks. Defensively, he was incredible in this game, as he almost always is. Plus 14, best on the team. He still played well despite not shooting well. So offense only, he wasn't very good by his standards, but defensively, he was so good that it overrides that. And I wrote about this a little bit on Tuesday, but Dyson now leads the NBA in total steals plus blocks, so stocks. He passed Victor Wembanyama tonight, and Wemby's out for the season, so he's not going to be going behind him. I would say Dyson is the likely season-ending leader in that category now in the NBA. He has been number 2 all year long, basically. Now he's number 1. And if you're looking for how rare or special that is, the last time that a player that was a perimeter player, like a guard or even a small forward, led the league in stocks was Michael Jordan in 1988. So that doesn't happen. Guys do not lead the league in steals plus blocks when they are guards, because there are generally more blocks than steals. As far as like the league leaders, especially in recent years, the block leader usually has more blocks than the steal leader has steals. This year, it won't be that way because Wemby's not playing anymore and Dyson's been great. But it is not a small thing to lead the league in stocks if you are a guard, and the Hawks have a guy that's probably going to do that. And he's doing it right now. So there's that. All right. Lastly, Trey Young. So it was a weird game for Trey. Trey did not have his floor game going. He was pretty good actually on 2. He was fine on twos. 7-15 from 2. That's not good, but it's not bad either. Even though I think he missed at least 3 or 4 like short floaters that he usually makes. But he was 0-5 from 3, notable there. And he still managed to be efficient in this game because he was 21 of 21 at the line. Now, that's a new career high in free throws made. It ties his career high in attempts as well. And I mentioned before, number 6 all time to ever do this in one game. But 35 points on essentially 30 shooting possessions. So he was still efficient despite the poor shooting from the field. 12 assists, 7 rebounds. Second half, 26 points. He was great. And one thing I wanted to at least mention on the show, I've already written about this at Fansided and on Twitter and on Blue Sky. But if you missed all of that, I didn't have it in the moment because I was doing the show from outside a hotel on Saturday night. But if you missed this, Trae missed the free throw intentionally in the final seconds against Indiana on Saturday. And that's off his own streak of consecutive free throw attempts that he made. He had made 47 in a row at that point. The franchise record is 50 by Kyle Korver. So Trae was not definitely, but probably going to break it, or at least having a pretty good chance to break that record. He knew that, I'm pretty sure. At least he did pretty quickly after that, if nothing else. But he missed it because it was the right thing to do for the team in that moment. So he misses the free throw, no big deal, ends the game. I brought it up the next day on social media, wrote about it, etc. Quinn tonight, unprompted, brought it up because from the postgame, notably because Trae was perfect again tonight. So how about this for a crazy stat? It is March 12th. About to be March 13th as I'm recording this podcast. Trae's missed one free throw since February 23rd. And he missed it on purpose. So Trae has 0 non-intentional misses in about 3 weeks at the line. He has now made 68 straight free throw attempts that he was trying to make. So that would be pretty impressive. That'd be a record by a lot. It's a new streak now. Maybe he'll still break it. But that was it's kind of a weird thing. I understand that. And obviously I mentioned before, but there's a debate about how you get that many free throw attempts. I encourage you to watch them all again if you want to dive into that. He earned them all. He was getting fouled. He made them. He was putting themselves in the right positions. They were in the bonus. I thought Trae was very good tonight, despite missing all 5 of his threes and some floaters early in the game that he probably usually makes. So there you go. And also the Hawks were +6 when he played. All right. From there, we will sign off now. But one quick note here, a little bit of news. I mentioned this a little bit, I think maybe 2 weeks ago. But Quinn Snyder was a candidate reportedly for the Australian national team coaching job. That is not going to happen. Now, ESPN Australia reported actually today that Quinn pulled himself out of the candidacy because he couldn't commit the time required. Something I actually said at the time on the podcast is like, that's a big job. And you don't quit your NBA job. Like it's an additional job. Now that happens. Obviously, Steve Kerr's done it at Team USA, Greg Popovich, but non-USA, it's actually a little bit more intensive. And Australia is not down the street. So it would have been a lot of commitment for Quinn. He's not going to do that. Just want to at least note that. And the last thing here, the Hawks play one more time at home. Their season-long homestand of 6 games ends on Friday. Now, that's a big one for a number of reasons. Number one, it's the Clippers. They're coming in. That's a good team. They're not a great team, but they are firmly in the playoff mix in the Western Conference. It's also the return of Bogey to Atlanta for the first time since he left the team at the deadline. And, by the way, a fun little nugget here, Bogey actually helped the Hawks tonight. Bogey had 30 points, a season high, the Clippers, in beating Miami on the road. So that gave the Hawks a needed win in the playoff race as they root against Miami. I also set up some more stakes for this game. My friend Kevin Chenard of Hawks.com does a great job, ATL29, asked Trey Young about that post-game, like, hey, Bogey had 30 points tonight, and Trey was smiling through the answer about having to play against him, because Bogey and Trey are very close. Their families are close, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, Trey said they'll be competing at a high level because they're both very competitive guys. That's true. But a pretty interesting thing, like Bogey, as he tends to do, is getting better as the season goes along. Big night tonight. And a little bit of drama stakes on Friday. Obviously, hopefully the tribute video will be popping for Bogey. Like he's obviously not like a legend necessarily, but certainly someone who had a lot of moments for the franchise over a long period of time, et cetera, et cetera. But also a big game and a fun game and a better opponent for the Hawks to be playing and a nice little test on Friday. By the way, with that win by the Clippers tonight against the Heat and the Hawks win, the Hawks now have a two-game lead on the Magic and a 2.5-game lead on the Heat. That's their biggest advantage against those teams in quite some time for the division lead, et cetera, et cetera. All right, everybody, that's enough of me on this Wednesday evening into Thursday. One programming note, barring some big news that I don't foresee happening, I will not have a show Thursday night, but I'll be back after the game on Friday. When there's Friday night games, I try to do a show after the game on Friday versus Friday morning because it's more relevant and all that stuff. But I will have a show after that. That's the last show of the week, and we'll reset it all and do it again the following week. But in the meantime, please subscribe to this podcast anywhere you find your podcast. That includes Apple and Spotify, YouTube, etc. Follow the show on X/Twitter at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there at BT Rowland. Follow my work as well on Blue Sky at BT Rowland. I'm also at patreon.com/BT Rowland for some extra audio, writing, nuggets, etc., etc. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast as always, and we'll see you again at the very latest after the game on Friday.